Welcome to episode 7 of Sharing Developer Stories hosted by Tech Rally. Today's guest is Sophie, a full-time software developer at Github, Flatiron School Alumni, and author of the book Programming Phoenix LiveView. Hey everyone, welcome to the Sharing Developer Stories hosted by Tech Rally. Although everyone is a special guest, today's guest is someone I'm super excited to talk about. She was my coding bootcamp classmate from Flatiron School back in 2015, and she's been killing it since we graduated. She's a software engineer at GitHub and also the author of her new book, Programming Phoenix LiveView. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Sophie. Sophie, how are you doing?
I am doing so good. I'm so happy to be here. It's so nice to see you. It's been a while. And yeah, I'm just really excited to hang out for a bit.
Yeah. How long has it been? It's like 5 years?
Years, probably. Yeah. It's so funny. It's strange because I feel like, I had a great time at Flatiron, which is where we were classmates together. And I feel like we all got along and had a blast. And then I stayed in touch with a few people that stuck around kind of the Flatiron world, like kept working there. And now I feel like it's curious because I've lost touch with a lot of classmates, but people that I then had taught in recent years or years after that, then I became friends with and stayed close to it. So it's sort of funny how that stuff works out.
Yeah, luckily we have Twitter, so we can always see what everyone's been up to. So
there are no secrets
am
anymore.
Lurking on the side and seeing all the good things that you're doing.
Yeah, likewise, man.
Yeah, but honestly, I actually don't really know where to start, but because I just want to ask you stuff after Flatiron School. But for the sake of our listeners, can you give them a little intro about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of going back, maybe doing the TLDR version of how I got into tech and Alex, how you and I know each other. So I attended the Flatiron School Programming Bootcamp back in 2015. And this was still in the slightly early days of programming bootcamps, I want to say. It was becoming a bit more of a popular thing, but not quite as widespread as it was now. So I went through this 3-month program all day, every day, writing code. We learned Ruby, we learned JavaScript, we learned Rails. And it was just, I don't know. I mean, of course, it goes without saying almost that it changed my life because prior to attending this program, I really never thought of myself as somebody that could do this kind of work and that could enjoy it. I never was good at math and science in school. I still can't do math or science, I guess, although maybe I'll change that one day. And so I don't know. I sort of always told myself this story, I'm the kind of person that can't learn this stuff. But I was curious. I was interested. I wanted to get a better job, frankly, and kind of get started on a career that would be, meaningful to me. So I, applied to this program, did some learning on my own. And as soon as I got to Flatiron, and I think a lot of people had this experience, and I started hanging out with my classmates, learning from my teachers, and just coding every day, I kind of got completely obsessed with it to the point where all I wanted to do, you're doing these homework assignments. I was falling asleep with my computer on my chest at night. I just didn't want to stop solving these problems. And it was really just this love affair that started then. And I also started doing a lot of writing even at that time because as a student, we were required to write a couple of blog posts, nothing scary. You didn't have to write a post that the world had never seen before. Just, write about something you were learning. And that was also something that really hooked me. I found it to be so rewarding to sit down and really dig in and try to articulate what it was that I was learning and struggling with. And that also got me started on this almost just personal journey of technical writing as well as learning how to code. So anyway, flash forward, wrapped up Flatiron, started teaching there, absolutely loved it. I still love teaching, but after a year or so of that, I started feeling I went to this program to learn how to code and I did. And so maybe now I should go have a job where I get to write code every day. So left, worked somewhere else. A couple of years later, actually found my way back to the Flatiron School, worked on the engineering team, did some IC work. Then I actually moved into an engineering management position before moving on to GitHub, where I've been for about a year now, back in an IC role. So that was kind of an interesting transition as well. And here I am.
Cool. That's such an awesome story. Just to rewind back a little bit, for me personally, I found coding through YouTube, but how did you find coding before you went to Flatiron School?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like I've definitely heard some people talk a little bit about this similarly, but I was working a little bit in WordPress because I was volunteering with a nonprofit in New York. And as one of the sort of maybe de facto young people who was volunteering there, I kind of got tasked with can you make a website or can you improve our website? And I was like, sure, WordPress exists. It's 2015. Who can't make a website? And WordPress did exist. I will give it that, but it was not great. And I just kept feeling like there's got to be a better way to do this. I want to understand how this really works. So I just started dabbling a little bit, learned a little HTML, CSS, started learning a little Ruby, I think through Code Academy at the time. And that was sort of enough for me to feel like, you know what, maybe I want to pursue this. And I had a friend that was going through the Flatiron School at the time, and it just really opened my eyes to the possibilities.
Wow, what perfect timing to have a friend that goes to coding bootcamp school.
Yeah.
I actually had the same experience when I was back in Austin. Not necessarily Flatiron School, but it was a school called Maker Square. But when he did go, he did say, hey, I heard through this podcast that Flatiron School in New York City is a pretty good coding bootcamp. So why don't you go there? And I was like, do I really want to move to New York right now? And in the middle of winter.
You moved. Yeah, you moved to go to school. That's
I
so
know.
cool.
Who would have? Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's
what you're saying is
crazy.
that our podcasts really matter and that someone out there will listen to them and it's just going to change their lives.
Exactly. Someone's
Yeah.
podcast really mattered, and somehow
Yes.
that translated over to me to, I mean, to be honest, New York was definitely on my bucket list
For sure.
of places to visit or even live. So I didn't realize that I would live here for 6 or 7 more years afterwards.
Crazy.
But
Yeah.
it's crazy how the world works. But what was your Flatiron School experience like?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. And at the same time, it was, of course, so hard. You're there all day, every day. You're there like 9 to 6 are the official hours, but, people would stay later and hang out and do homework, which was actually fun, as weird as that is to say. So I don't know, it was a lot of hard work and I kind of just threw myself into it, but I just kind of enjoyed that part of it, the hard work part of it. And I think that what I really learned how to do, and this is something that I'll really credit Avi with, who was our teacher at the time and the co-founder of Flatiron. I really feel like I learned how to fall in love with being confused, if that makes sense. And that's something that I tried to give to my students as well. Like, if it's easy, there's something missing. And that feeling of like, I'm totally lost, I'm just surrounded by, not enough information to solve this problem. That's a feeling that I sort of learned to seek out. And I think it's something that even just subconsciously has really driven me forward in my career since that time. And I'm so grateful to Flatiron for sort of instilling that in us. And it's also a great teaching mentality from the point of view of a teacher, because it means that it's okay if your students are confused and you don't know the way to help them all the time, because that's also a really integral part of that learning experience.
Yeah, I think we got lucky back in 2015 because we had the co-founder as our instructor.
Yeah,
and
I think we
know
were the last class that he, taught full time. Yeah,
right. And definitely the curriculum has changed a lot, but at that time, there was really no concept of failing. It was just, you're behind, so you need to catch up somehow.
Yeah, because it was still small and like scrappy enough that you would just sort of figure it out. And as it scaled up, there are a lot more processes and support systems in place for students, which is definitely a good thing. But I kind of liked that sort of scrappy vibe of, we're just going to figure it out. We don't know, you don't know, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I remember I was struggling a lot, but I don't recall you struggling too much, because I don't know if you had a really good poker face, but I always felt that you were the one that was helping others, actually teaching the concept to others. So I just thought that was super awesome. And man, I was jealous at times, because there were very smart not professional software developers, but some people they just got it.
Yes,
I was just so amazed by just the skills and how fast people can quickly pick up things. But I just was wondering, like, how much do you attest to learning by teaching? Did that help you become a better software developer?
Absolutely, without a doubt. And that's something that I started noticing, even when I was a student at Flatiron. So what I was doing before I went to the Flatiron program was tutoring the LSAT, the law school admission test. So I went from spending all day, every day tutoring students in this standardized test to spending all day, every day learning how to code, but surrounded by other people who were also learning. So I sort of already had this mentality of like, the way to understand this better is to fall back on what I had been doing with literally all of my time, which is teaching other people. So it's not so much that, oh yes, I can teach my classmates because I am definitely the expert in this, but more that it was a habit that I was comfortable with. And it was a way for me to figure out myself what was going on. If you're trying to explain how something works, you are forced to understand it better. And then when I graduated the program and started teaching there, every single day I became a better developer. And I still find that that's true whenever I'm, doing mentoring or partnering with a junior developer on the team, seeing the ways that other people approach problems, seeing the questions they ask, and just being forced to explain steps that you can't just gloss over. Like, I don't really know how that works. I just take it for granted. It makes you a better developer. And I think a huge part, especially as I've become more senior in my career, a huge part of being an impactful engineer is your ability to communicate about your code. I was thinking about this today. I feel like at this point in our careers, like, look, we've been doing this for like 5 or 6 years now, maybe longer, because what is time? I'm not really sure how many years it's been. It's like 50% you can write the code that solves the problem, and 50% you can communicate about the code that solves the problem. And I think people don't realize that. They think my job is to push out this code and get this done. But if no one else on your team understands that, what you've been working on, if no one else has enough context to even review your PR, let's say, or dev on this in the future, or fix the bug that might arise with it in a couple of weeks, then you might as well not have done it. So really spending just as much time articulating your code and your thought process as actually just producing that code, I think that's what really brings you to that next level of engineering impact.
I completely agree. And that's one thing I definitely noticed when I was mentoring or even pairing with a lot of junior developers.
Mm-hmm.
They have this approach, and I'm pretty sure I had this approach as well when I first started, was this shotgun approach. Like, oh, this doesn't work, so I'm going to try this other one.
Yeah.
Oh, this doesn't work. Try this out. It just starts iterating 3, 4, 5 times. And then you realize, yes, I came to a solution, but I didn't ultimately think about why I came to that solution.
Mm-hmm.
It's better to just hold back a little bit, think about, okay, I expect this to happen. And even if you are wrong, at least you kind of thought about it and decided that I believe that this is going to work because
Mm-hmm.
of this. But I see a lot of junior developers that are like, oh, this isn't working, so I'm going to try a different function, like for each. And then they're like, oh, this isn't working, I'm going to do a
Mm-hmm.
map or a filter and reduce. And all of these functions that they know exist, but they don't really know how to use it.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me.
It's like that spaghetti on the wall approach. Like, I'm just going to throw everything I have at it and see what sticks. And like, we've all been there, you're really stuck on something. You don't really know what the hell's going on. You're just going to kind of brute force your way through that problem. And I've done that. And that's not always wrong, but exactly like you said, that ability to take a step back and ask yourself, like, okay, I've just made this code change. What do I think is going to happen next? And then I can compare. Is that what happened? Great. I totally know why. Or if that's not what happened, now I have to think about why that didn't work. I think it's a really hard skill to develop because it requires patience, but it's something that I actually talk explicitly about with my students and my mentees. Like, before you run that code, I see you reaching to hit the enter button on that change you just made. Before you do that, tell me what you think this is going to do. And just that split second, like, let me think about this. It makes such a big difference.
Yeah, I do the same exact thing with my junior developers. When I pair with them, I go, hey, okay, what do you expect to happen right here? Before we refresh the browser, tell me exactly what you think is going to happen here. And even them articulating what they expect to happen is just a win for them, because you're right. Sometimes we just think so clearly in code. We're like, if this, then this, if this, then this. But if you can actually explain what you think is going to happen and why, it just makes you a significantly better developer. So yeah, definitely kudos. And yeah, I do have a question about your teaching and then how that translates into your writing. I noticed that you do write a lot of blogs, and what kind of impact has that made in your career?
Yeah, I actually think that it has had a huge impact in my career, but it's sort of like, it's not direct, right? It's not like, oh, I wrote this blog post, so then I got hired to do this amazing job. It's more like the way that it's honed my skills as, yes, an engineer. It's made me a better engineer to have to, just like we've been talking about, take a step back, sit down and think through my code and why I solved a problem a certain way. Like, that makes you better able to write even better code more quickly in the future. That goes without saying. You will write better code. You will do it faster. You will become a more competent engineer the more writing you do. But beyond that, I think my communication skills are something that have really helped me like accelerate my career just in my day-to-day job. So even as a junior developer, especially because I have like a liberal arts background, a lot of us that did this career change, programming thing, have various backgrounds and other skill sets that kind of come to bear. But my ability to write well about what I was working on, whether it's documenting an issue really well or writing a PR description that's very informative, or writing documentation or blog posts for other people on my team to level them up in something that we're working on. That's the kind of stuff, frankly, that gets you noticed and gets you more responsibility at work, if that's something that you're after, of course. And I think it's something that helped me transition into like team lead roles. It's helped when I was a junior and then kind of like growing from there. It's something that really helped me transition from a team lead to an engineering manager when I wanted to try out that role. And at GitHub, because we're a fully remote, completely distributed company with people around the world in different time zones, my ability to really articulate what I'm working on in written documentation has been just, I cannot overstate. It's the only way that I'm able to be effective at work that any of us honestly are on my team, especially. It's really all about how you can write about what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a very super underrated characteristic to have within a team or within an individual, because I know
Hmm.
some people just want to code all the time, but they
Yeah.
don't want to give context. So the next person joining the team is struggling trying to figure out, hey, how do I
Hmm.
install this Docker? Because no one
Yeah.
actually wrote any documentation around it.
Yeah. Or even how do I review your PR? Like
How
what,
do I review?
what is this code trying to do? Um,
Right.
so yeah, just like trying to sharpen those written communication
Hmm.
skills. It's definitely been something that my team has been working really hard on for all of us. I'm not an expert at it. Like I have plenty of room to grow.
Hmm.
And my team has had some particular challenges because the product I work on was actually like an acquihire company. So the product was acquired by GitHub and the team was acquired by GitHub, and the team is amazing and they created this incredible product. But the team went from working in person, all in the same place in an office, to now joining a globally distributed company. So that was certainly a challenge. And then I joined after that. So it's not like I was a GitHub expert and then I joined their team. Like we were sort of all new together. And then we also sort of merged with like a counterpart of our team, folks that had come over from Microsoft who are all based in India. So we've got like Vancouver time zone, New York time zone, Hyderabad. Nobody's awake at the same time. And
Right.
now all of a sudden it's like it's just more important than ever before that what we write really facilitates us moving forward in our actual coding.
Right. I mean, that's makes total sense. And but I want to kind of shift a little bit with what you were talking about in terms of writing blogs and everything like that. How did that impact you and your social network or networking
Mhm.
outside of your job? Because I know you're very involved in many different communities. Did people notice your blogs and then they start reaching out to you? What was the impact of you writing essentially?
Yeah, I think that's something that definitely happened. And again, it's not this straight line between like, oh, I wrote this blog post, so then this amazing
Right.
opportunity was offered to me. And so I wouldn't say like, yes, write blogs because you too will meet important people like and become famous. First of all, that's not actually what happened to me. And second of all, like,
No,
yeah,
I
yeah,
definitely know you didn't do that because I know you just love writing and
yeah.
it's just
But
all about
it,
that consistency. Yeah.
yeah, but it did have, it has an impact like that. I think if you're just genuinely excited about what you're learning and you want to share that with the world, like opportunities are going to come from that. People, even if it's just as simple as somebody was really grateful for what they read and they left a really encouraging comment or they emailed you. But if you're really going to keep up your blogging, you're going to get inspired by what you write to give conference talks and meetup talks, and you're going to meet people in those communities. And you're just going to form relationships because you're putting yourself out there. So, yeah, like, sure, maybe you're going to write something and it's going to get the attention of a particular person who reaches out to you. But beyond that, your writing and your putting yourself out there is going to push you then to take further steps that you maybe didn't think you were going to take. You didn't think you were going to submit a conference talk and then have a great time and make all these new friends and meet these people. But once you wrote that blog post and really started thinking, you felt like you had this great idea and there were some claps on your Medium post or whatever. So it pushed you to do this thing. It just, I don't know, like things just follow.
Right. And ultimately, you're right. You should blog for yourself. And then if all the other things do come where people reach out to you and thank
Hmm.
you or send you an email or ask you to do a conference talk, that's great. But if you write the blog with the expectation, oh, I hope I'm famous or I have the most GitHub
Yeah.
stars or whatever, that's definitely the
Yeah.
wrong motivation. So that's it's still cool to see. I mean, for me, I'm not much of a writer, but I do have a YouTube channel, and that's just been another
Totally.
way of being able to just be with other YouTubers, other
Hmm.
developers, and whatnot. So yeah, I do it for myself, but I do appreciate people reaching out and just giving me some good feedback and just sharing knowledge in general.
Yeah,
I
it's a
do
nice
have a
feeling.
question. Yeah, exactly. I do have a question for you. Prior to GitHub, you did mention that at GitHub you do a lot of Golang, but prior to GitHub, what language or what stack did you primarily use?
Elixir, and I miss it so much. It's truly the best. I love it to death. Yeah, so at Flatiron, we started out as this is where I was at right before GitHub on the Flatiron engineering team. We started out with like traditional air quotes Rails monolith. And then over the years, we started introducing some Elixir. We had one colleague, Stephen Nunez, who was sort of obsessed with it and is very convincing and just got a lot of other people excited about it. So by the end of my time there, I think we had 2 or 3 running production services in Elixir, and we were starting to do the work of not like saying, okay, yes, everything is microservices now, but just starting to peel off the things that were no longer maintainable in the monolith into standalone services. Those services, since they could be greenfield, we chose to build them in Elixir. And I have to say, I was just consistently blown away by the kind of developer productivity that Elixir brings to the table. Like, I'm seeing teams of people who are, let's say, relatively junior to begin with, and certainly brand new to Elixir, being able to ramp up and put brand new applications fully into production to solve problems for our businesses at scale in like just record time. And you get all these things out of the box, like observability out of the box. Observability is really treated like a first-class citizen in the Elixir and the Erlang ecosystem. And every single day I would be sort of surprised and impressed by something new. The day would start with like, oh gosh, we've got to do this new thing that we've never done before in Elixir. How long is this going to take? And what's this going to do to our, delivery date on this project? And like an hour later, somebody would come back to the team and say, oh, I figured it out because Elixir makes it easy, or this community really supported me, or the documentation on it is really great. So, I mean, I could go on and on about all the reasons why I think Elixir is the best. But what really struck me, especially from an engineering manager position, when you are really responsible for the productivity of your team, what really struck me is like not just the developer happiness, but how productive it really enables teams to be.
Right. And do you feel that learning Ruby and Ruby on Rails prior to jumping into Elixir was a smoother transition versus maybe another language, or is that pretty irrelevant?
That's really interesting. I think yes and no. I think on the one hand, like, look, a lot of the people that built Elixir are people that came from the Ruby communities, like Jose Valim, who developed Elixir Lang from the very beginning, was, I believe, part of the Rails core team. If that's a little bit wrong, you still get the idea. Came out of the Ruby community, built Elixir. So a lot of the guiding principles are the same. We're trying to optimize for developer happiness. We're trying to create a community that's very welcoming and opening and open and friendly. We are trying to write code that is eloquent, for example. That's one of the things I really loved about Ruby when I was learning it, is that it reads like English, and so does Elixir. And there's also lots of parallels just at a super high level in terms of how something like the Phoenix web framework works compared to Rails. You can draw a lot of parallels, even if under the hood those parallels start to fall apart a little bit. But I think what I experienced, like once you dig down, you'll find the differences. But
of course, you dig deeper and deeper, and
exactly.
you'll see all the differences.
Exactly. But something that I experienced that I've heard a lot of people who came from Ruby or any OO language to Elixir or functional languages, you really bring a lot of this OO baggage with you. So for the first, probably year of writing Elixir, I just wrote terrible, super messy, really convoluted Elixir because I was trying to make it object-oriented. And once I was able to kind of let go of some of those patterns, which hold you back, I think, when you're writing functional code that is pure and immutable, once I was able to kind of get out of those habits, I was writing code that was a lot cleaner in Elixir. And that was like a transition that was tough at first, and then definitely very rewarding.
Yeah, I know you're a big fan of Elixir, but for a new developer, would you recommend Elixir as a first language?
Actually, I definitely would. So I'm part of a mentoring group right now that Bruce Tate created. It's called Elixir Chat, and it's basically just a group of people that are mostly brand new to programming. Some people have backgrounds in some other languages, and some people are learning to code for the very first time. And seeing how they approach this functional language without that object-oriented baggage is, first of all, really fascinating. Like, there's some things that I think it's going to be so hard to explain or that I'm confused about, and that students are explaining to me because they don't have this overhead of what's an object, and 2 objects can't be the same object. None of that garbage is a problem in Elixir. And I think because Elixir is eloquent, because the ecosystem on the Beam is very well developed, and because the documentation is really robust and the community is really strong, I've actually been having some really great experiences teaching Elixir as a first language.
Got it. And if I could push back just a little bit here, I would say that the Elixir community is pretty relatively small if you had to compare it to maybe even Golang and JavaScript.
Totally.
What do you think the traction hasn't grown as fast as these other languages?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that the community definitely has a long way to go in terms of it being pretty small. And certainly when I was first learning, it was very, very small and also predominantly people who were coming over from Erlang. And that just happens to be a demographic that like skews a little bit older and male and white. And it's not at all that people I encountered weren't nice or welcoming, but I was just kind of looking around for more people like me, more people who are beginners, more people who would make me feel comfortable asking like those noob questions. And that was something that I felt like I sort of missed out on when I was new to Elixir. But I would say that that's already changed a lot. I think, what is it, the yearly like Stack Overflow survey or something like that has shown Elixir like super climbing the charts. And I think we're going to see that increasing a lot more. I think you see way more companies than ever before adopting Elixir, Erlang, and other languages on the beam. So I think it's certainly, of course, smaller and less mature than Ruby, Go, JavaScript. But as far as like its growth in such a short period of time, I think it's actually astounding.
Right, right. And I think a lot of people associate Elixir or Erlang to the WhatsApp, that
Hmm.
blog post that a lot of people wrote. So a lot of times they're like, we're not building WhatsApp. We don't really need to use this language. But how would you push back on individuals that are just trying to build your, I don't want to say your basic app, but
Yeah.
somewhat of that model view controller mindset application? What is that benefit of using with Elixir plus the Phoenix
Hmm.
versus another, I don't know, another stack node or Ruby on Rails or
For sure.
whatnot?
Yeah. I actually really love this question. It's something I've been thinking about a lot lately because I think when you think Elixir, you're like, well, I need to reach for Elixir when I have massive scale problems. And I think up until perhaps more recently, when the ecosystem was less mature and the community was more mature, I would have said that that's probably true. If you want your 15-minute Rails blog, like you should use a Rails generator and make your 15-minute Rails blog. But
Right.
I think that's not true anymore. I think the new 15-minute Rails blog is your 15-minute Phoenix LiveView app because you also get that interactivity out of the box. You get those WebSockets out of the box because what regular old web app that you might be, let's say, commissioned to build these days doesn't need just a little bit of real-time interaction, doesn't need just a little bit of push notifications. And if you're
Right.
reaching for Rails or JavaScript or some of these other frameworks, like the overhead of bringing in these technologies is high and it increases the complexity and it makes it much harder to test. It increases your development cycle times. It means your developers are splitting their brain power between the back end and the front end. That makes bugs harder to track down. That makes it harder to get new features out the door. And something like Phoenix LiveView, which centers all of the code and your entire team's brain power on the back end and just abstracts all the JavaScript into a tested and robust framework. How can you resist this, right? It's easy to use. You can be highly productive in it. And whether you need it right now or not, you get the concurrency, the fault tolerance, and the massive scale. It's there for you.
Yeah, you're not wrong there, especially with teams that are in different stacks that need to integrate WebSockets or any of
Hmm.
those things that really don't come out of the box. You're probably going to be dedicating multiple sprints to get that integrated. You have to research the
Hmm.
libraries, which npm WebSocket should we be using?
Yeah,
Sometimes with npm there are multiple multiple libraries that people
absolutely.
come up with. So it establishing that consistency, at least within that Phoenix framework, is a very nice to have. I would just One thing that you probably do need is someone that is like yourself familiar with the Phoenix framework and has a little bit, I'll say expertise. You have that expertise
Yeah,
to provide
absolutely.
that knowledge, and that comes with any team, right? Yeah, any team
Hmm.
that is gonna have, whether you're Golang or React or Angular, it
Yeah,
doesn't really matter. You
you
just
need
need that. Yeah,
someone,
you need
absolutely. Like
someone,
ramping up
right?
a new team on a new technology is its own risk and it comes with its
Right,
own downsides for sure.
right, right.
Which is actually why we wrote this book, not to plug the book too much, although I
Right.
would
I was
love
just
to
gonna
plug the
ask you
book.
actually.
We really wanted this book to be an on-ramp type book, right? If you've written some Phoenix and you're kind of a Phoenix expert, I think you're still going to get a lot out of it. You're going to become a LiveView expert as well. But if you're pretty new to Phoenix and if you're relatively new to Elixir, this is absolutely the book for you. This is going to show you how to build a brand new Phoenix LiveView app from the ground up. It's going to introduce all the foundational concepts and bring you through to the advanced level. And it's going to approach it in the way that you would build out a real application, like in your actual life. And I think that, again, this was absolutely my experience as an engineering manager of several teams that were new to Elixir, but building in these technologies for the first time. The learning curve in Elixir and in Phoenix, in my experience, is extremely gentle. And I've seen teams just ramp up so quickly on these technologies and be so productive in them with not a lot of lead time, which is kind of a huge deal.
Right, right. And how long did that book take to write to full
So
completion?
we're not quite done yet. It's in beta. So Prog does this thing where we'll release the like online or the EPUB. Do people still say EPUB? I don't know. The EPUB version of the book that you can buy on the publisher website and download. And that's like most of the book. That's more than half. And as we start releasing the final chapters that we're working on, you'll get like the fresh downloads. And then once it's sort of done, we'll also have the print version that'll be available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. So we've got about 3 chapters left that we're still deving on, and those will come out over the next couple of months.
Awesome, awesome. So right now you've written a book, you work full time on GitHub. What else do you do? I know you do some other stuff like the podcast and
Yeah.
elaborate, please.
Yeah, no, there's lots of stuff. Sometimes I do wonder like how I do it all, but it's not like as much as it seems. So Beam Radio podcast, people should definitely check out if they're interested in Elixir and all things Beam. So that's me, Bruce Tate, Lars Vikman, Alex Koutmos, and then Steven Nunez, who was teaching at Flatiron. I taught at Flatiron with him, and we just have a great time. It's super casual. We basically just hang out for an hour every other week and kind of talk about Elixir and what we're learning. And sometimes we have guests on who are involved in the community, which is always a treat. It's pretty new, so would love for people to check it out and, subscribe to wherever podcasts are sold. And I also do some Elixir tutoring with a group that Bruce Tate put together, which honestly is the highlight of my week. I do miss teaching, even if I don't want to do it full time all day, every day. Just really look forward to those Thursday evening sessions, helping people make these connections and also learning from them and the questions that they ask. It's so rewarding. And I don't know, I probably do other stuff. Oh, right. Codebeam. Codebeam Americas just happened. I'm on the program committee there. It was super fun. We've got Codebeam Europe coming up. Probably by the time this episode comes out, the CFP will be closed. But stay tuned for Codebeam San Francisco in the fall. Submit talks today. I think that, it's a lot. I'm involved in different things, but it's really the people that make it rewarding for me. It's getting to work with all of these people around the world who are helping each other learn and helping to grow this community. And it ends up being a rewarding experience. Sometimes, you're stretched a little thin and you have to make sure you don't oversubscribe yourself. But I like it. I like being busy.
Yeah, I think people undervalue what it actually means to be a software developer in terms of the community and being able to be social and like to actually talk to people and bounce off ideas. I'm sure you wouldn't be able to create your book if it wasn't for all the
No,
other
I mean, to be clear, I
individuals that
have an
typed up.
amazing co-author, Bruce Tate,
Right,
who's written many books before. Absolutely could have done this without him. I've learned a ton from him. And our editor too, Jackie Carter, is like
right.
totally incredible, out of this world. Every time I talk to her, I become a better writer. So it's like a group effort.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I would want to advise to any future developers that land their first job. This is definitely not the end. don't
Yes,
don't
yeah.
assume that, I could just relax after
I'm
my
here
first
now.
job and just do a
Yeah.
9 to 5, right? Like you see me, I started my YouTube channel and
Mhm.
I do a lot of coding on the side as well. You see I've seen a lot of my cohorts become really successful, but I'm 100% sure just because you graduated from a 3-month bootcamp doesn't
Yes.
necessarily make
You
you
know
like a
everything
senior
now.
developer, right?
Yeah,
So
and
that's
I think
definitely
like there's this thing that I feel like I see my students believe, which is one day, somehow I'll get to your level and then I won't have to feel this way anymore, which is confused and frustrated and like totally lost. And I'm like, no, man, like this feeling never goes away. I am as confused as you are every single day. I'm maybe not confused about like how hashes work, but that same feeling is what I basically bring to bear in my life. And I think that's a good thing, right? That means that we're continuing to push ourselves, continuing to learn and grow, and building these connections with each other, because you don't get unstuck from some of these really gnarly problems by yourself.
Yeah, no matter what level you're at, I always feel you're gonna run into a problem. So it's just it's just the experience of being a software developer where you kind of know where I've kind of seen this before, I've seen this problem before, and then you just kind of go back to your past experiences.
Totally.
It's just that newer developers just haven't gone to that point yet, so they just need to like practice and practice and
For
practice.
sure. And then there's
Yeah.
always a new class of problem, right? Maybe you've seen problem A before and you were able to solve it more
Right.
quickly. Welcome to problem B. You've never seen that before and it's going to kind of suck. So that never stops.
What do you notice about your newer students that what kind of issues do they run into? Like, for example, me, what I notice is a lot of new people that get into coding, they never read errors. They just kind of go to Google right
Yes,
away.
it's red.
But
I hate it. I'm scared. Oh my God, I noticed that so much. I noticed that a lot when I was like teaching full time at Flatiron. Basically just this fear of error messages. But if you can demystify that a little bit for people, if you can say, look, it's just English words. Like there's a lot of
right.
garbage in here that we're going to gloss over, but we're going to find the piece of this that is communicative to you. I think that's a really big piece of it. And the other thing is something that you already brought up, which is just this impetus to kind of throw spaghetti at a wall and sort of brute force your way through a problem and just try a million things, run it until it works without stopping and asking yourself, what do I think is going to happen next? That is like the magic question that I really try to drive home to people, hopefully not ad nauseum, which is just stop and ask yourself, what do I think is going to happen? And that makes such a big difference. That really unlocks a lot of doors for people.
Yeah, I completely agree. So yeah, I think this is a good time to close out. But before I do want to always end it with a theme or like a very one type of question. For you, I would just love to hear your thoughts or advice on people that are just starting off and learning how to code. How should they start, and what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And it's changed so much since like you and I went through boot camp. So I don't think there's one path for everybody, right? Like I know I have many colleagues who have computer science degrees and other people that completely taught themselves everything they know or went to a boot camp or studied a little bit in college, but whatever. There's so many pathways to get into it. I think the real trick, if I can call it that, is figure out what you like about it, right? There's got to be
Mm,
something if you want to learn how to do this, if you're really trying to push yourself in this direction. Is it problem solving? Is it working with other people? Is it writing about what you've learned? Is it that invention, right? I get to invent new products and ideas and make them happen and just spend time in that area. And that doesn't mean that like, okay, well, what I love about coding is coming up with new ideas for new products. So I'm going to have to go find a job where I can do that. Like it's not that cut and dry, but it's work that into your life and keep that in mind in your day-to-day work, because if you're able to connect to something that you actually like about what you're doing all day, then I think a lot of the rest of it is just going to come.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And it's so funny because you actually didn't mention money at all. And that's such a good mindset because I remember when we went to coding bootcamp school, it wasn't necessarily, I mean, the financial incentive was definitely there, but a lot of the
Hmm.
times I would argue that a lot of us were just really miserable at our last jobs.
Yes.
And and we just wanted to change our lives
Yeah.
because we found coding as a way to number one, enjoy what we do, become problem solvers, figure things out. And of
Yeah.
course the money does come eventually, but at that moment in time we were just thinking about, wow, software development is actually fun, coding is really fun, and this is what I
Yeah.
want to do. So really, really good advice, really, really good
Yeah.
advice. So before I close again, are there any plugs you want to squeeze? And if anyone wants to reach out to you or send you a message, what would be the best way to contact you?
Okay, laundry list of plugs. So I apologize in advance. Beam Radio, that's beamrad.rad.io, beamrad.io. Beam Radio is our Elixir and all things Beam podcast. I would love for your listeners to check it out if they're interested in learning more about those technologies or that community. Code Beam Europe is coming up, and I think that we've been doing virtual events really right. So I've been to a lot of virtual conferences where you just kind of sit there and stare at a computer all day, and it frankly sucks, and you're sort of wondering like, why did I spend money on this? Because I can just watch old conference talks on YouTube whenever I want, and I don't have to do it for 8 hours. We try to make the event as dynamic as possible. We try to involve the audience as much as possible. Q&As, conversations with experts, panel discussions among friends, and we have a lot of nice social activities, coffees, and happy hours and stuff like that. And I found it to be a really fun experience, and I really did feel like I was connecting with colleagues and people from around the world that, I don't get to see, certainly not now.
Right.
So check out CodeBeam Europe if you're interested. And then CodeBeam San Francisco will be coming up in the fall. What else? So many things. Buy my book, Programming Phoenix LiveView, by yours truly and Bruce Tate on a Pragmatic Bookshelf. You can find it there, just there for now since it's in beta. And I also have a site that I started a little while back called breakin.tech. And it really focuses on a lot of what we talked about tonight, which is how do I get started? Why should I learn how to code? There's resources on there for people who are just starting to learn, for folks who are looking for their first job, for people who are in that first developer job. And that was very much a labor of love, and certainly a big thank you to all of my friends and colleagues who contributed interviews and blog posts to that. And I'm really proud of it. I would love for people to check it out.
Cool. That's awesome. And I'll definitely 100% make sure to add it in the show notes or in the YouTube description. That way, other people that are just watching the video can just see directly what resources they could use to get a hold of you. Is if they want to actually send you a message of some sort, do you think Twitter is the best way?
Or? Yeah, Twitter would be great. It's you can put it in your show notes, but it's SM_DeBenedetto on Twitter. And I love hearing from people, honestly. I love talking about this stuff. So if anybody wants to reach out, I'm really all ears.
Cool. Awesome. And man, I'm so excited to catch up again with a fellow classmate. I think I have a few other classmates actually that are going to be in queue coming up soon. So I'm really excited to just catch up with everyone. And yeah, it's really great to see after 6 years what everyone's been up to.
I know. It's crazy.
So I know, because we definitely shared a lot of highs and lows. And now if you look at us now, some of us are directors, senior developers, managers, and now even authors, which is so awesome.
So I mean, man, you're at Amazon. You've got this amazing podcast, this channel. Like, it's incredible to see how you've been doing. And I'm so glad that you reached out and that we did this.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really crazy the kind of impact and change we can make in such a short time, if you think about it still.
I know.
So I'm really excited to see what you're going to be doing in the next 5 years, and hopefully I can keep up with you in that level. But no, it was really good talking to you. And for our guests, hope you enjoyed this conversation that I had with Sophie, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.